Jai Jyoti, Jai Bhim to all. The topic Mahatma Phule as Plebian Philosopher, which I picked basically because there was debate which took place in 1970s. The debate was whether Mahatma Phule was philosopher. There was an article placed by a Marxist scholar who has taken a nickname called the friend of working class, and argued that Phule and Ambedkar was not philosopher. He somehow, oh sorry. Sorry for this disturbance. One important aspect which he picked, that author picked, was that there was difference between ideology.
Professor Bagade, we are not able to hear you. Is that others? I just wanted to find Vaishak?
No, the voice is breaking.
Okay. And I'm not
I
able
think
to.
he's muted himself, it seems.
Professor Bagade, you have to unmute yourself. I have a feeling that he's using two devices, and that's why there was an echo.
And also he has left the meeting as of now.
Okay, wait.
I think there is some connection issue. He is disconnecting.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for this disturbance. The Wi-Fi connection is not well. However, now I have started working on the data. However, we will engage with the topic which we are discussing. So, the author made difference between ideology and philosophy. He argued that Phule and Ambedkar were ideologues and not philosophers. According to him, the specific issues which were discussed in their philosophy might have some kind of universal implications. However, their philosophy, their ideology is, their thinking is nothing but ideology, basically because there is nothing kind of concrete philosophical kind of frame in their writing. And he's in that particular article argued that Shankaracharya was philosopher, Russell was philosopher, Karl Marx was philosopher, Hegel was philosopher, but Lokmanya Tilak, Mahatma Phule, Ambedkar, and so on were not philosophers; they were ideologues. So this debate has a certain kind of, you can say, implication in Maharashtra, and not only in Maharashtra, but all over India and all over the world, that what exactly Mahatma Phule contributed to the world of ideas, whether he was philosopher. Particularly, Comrade Sharad Patil took up this position that Mahatma Phule was philosopher, and he has taken cue from Gramsci. Gramsci has defined that all human beings are philosopher. Every individual is a philosopher, but there is a difference there is skilled and unskilled labor. The unskilled kind of laborer doesn't know about the engine well, but engineer knows about uh, the whole processes of production, and therefore he equates engineer with philosopher and argues that philosopher is that man who takes up the issue, document the present, and studies it from history to present time, and sort out some kind of solutions to it with some kind of universal grounding. And he argued that Mahatma Phule and Ambedkar doesn't have epistemology of their own and ontology of their own. Therefore, they cannot be termed as philosophers. So this is an exercise. My exercise is on the backdrop of the debate which has taken place in 1970s and later on in 2010 and 20s. So why I am arguing that why Phule was a philosopher. So therefore, we have to understand that the man who has argued that Phule was ideologue has not understood the way Phule was engaging with philosophy. It is obvious that whenever you are engaged in particular kind of engagements, you are taking up grand ideas which are universal. So this is Phule's kind of standpoint where he was engaging particularly with caste, the nature of caste, the exploitation of caste, the domination of caste, the certain kind of processes of caste, a slavery of caste, and so on and so forth. And therefore, this particular is not seen as universal. This is a certain kind of particular which is having a certain kind of regional, which having in regional domain, which is the India within which caste operates. So it doesn't have any universal implications as such, and therefore Phule could not be understood as philosophers. So while Mahatma Phule was engaging with caste, while Mahatma Phule was engaging with the gender differentiation or gender hierarchy, caste hierarchy, he was engaging with larger universal issues. For example, Mahatma Phule has very strongly theorized what is knowledge. And Phule's vantage point of knowledge has his own kind of grounding, where he was looking towards the knowledge, the issue of knowledge. And he has classified knowledge in three spheres. One sphere of knowledge is understood as the knowledge of self. Means the kind of, we can say, gender imageries, gender roles or caste roles. One is Brahmin, one is mother, one is father. These kinds of identities and the roles which we perform in everyday life are not somehow ascertained by the individual himself or herself. These kinds of roles, these kinds of identities are structured by the system of knowledge, which is very much there, and therefore one has to understand that Phule, in certain way, was talking about the power-knowledge dichotomy. This point was earlier mentioned by Deshpande, and he made that Phule talked about power-knowledge before Foucault. However, he has not explained what was Phule talking about power and knowledge. And therefore, we have to understand where Phule is taking up this issue of power and knowledge. Phule is talking about power and knowledge in such a way that he said that all kind of gender roles and caste roles or caste identities and gender identities are structured through knowledge, and this knowledge is Brahminical knowledge. And therefore, the non-Brahmins or the Shudra have to ascertain their own identity through engaging with history. They should search their identities, they should search their own histories, and by unearthing the real history of Shudra, they will topple down the Brahminical kind of hegemony, which is structured through knowledge of identities of caste. He said that the identities of caste like Brahmins, the identities like Asman, Sambhas, those, how will a low caste will accept these kinds of identity which are inhuman, which are humiliating, which are inferior. So he said that these identities were created by a system of Brahmanism, and that was inflicted on the, 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 the kind of communities, Shudra communities, and they themselves have, in certain way, are attributing their selfhoods within that knowledge system. So they have to search their own identities through engaging with history. So this is a type of, we can say, one sphere of knowledge which he was defining. The second sphere of knowledge is knowledge which he talked about, Anbhavik Jnana, the empiricist domain of knowledge, where he says that all kinds of knowledges about the everyday science and everyday kind of technology is basically the empiricist knowledge. For example, we are talking through this internet, mails, or we can say we are having certain kind of mobiles and things like that. In our homes, there are certain kinds of, we can say, various kinds of instruments we are using, and the production and other processes. There is empiricist knowledge prevailing through all kinds of our activity. This particular knowledge, the materialist knowledge, is defined as empiricist knowledge. And the third kind of knowledge which is defined was knowledge of ethics, or the knowledges of relationship. What is my relations with you? What is your relations with me? This kind of connections are structured through certain kind of morality, certain kind of moral laws, ethics, and this ethics is a structure which is largely there as a system, and the Brahmanism has its own kind of, you can say, ethical knowledge. And therefore, one has to understand that the knowledge, and particularly the slavery, has its own kind of entanglement. Phule was, in a certain way, was unraveling the linkages between these three kinds of knowledges, and was somehow taking position that these knowledge should be somehow produced by the subaltern, caste subaltern themselves. So this is a certain kind of grounding on which Mahatma Phule was talking about the knowledges. He was very specific about the empiricist knowledges. For example, he was arguing that the Brahmanism has denied knowledge to Shudra. In that sense, they have delinked the kind of organic relations between intellectual and labor. So these kinds of, we can say, differentiation which Brahmanism has inflicted, it certainly damaged the capabilities of Shudra to learn and earn knowledge, and such kinds of, we can say, arguments he offered while arguing about the conception of knowledge. So if at all, what is knowledge is the issue of philosophy, then Mahatma Phule, in his own way, was talking about what is knowledge. So he was, in a certain way, was engaging with the philosophical issue of epistemology, or what is knowledge. One has to understand that he was, in a certain way, was making a certain kind of ontological issue of existence. The ontology is understood to be a kind of principles of existence that engages with the existence. This whole kind of ideas which engages with the existence is understood as ontology. So what is the Shudras? Who were the Shudras? What is Brahmin? What is the human being? All such kinds of questions are somehow questions of ontology. Phule, in his own way, was somehow engaging with these kinds of questions, particularly what is Shudra, and he understood the Shudra with a certain kind of conceptual probe called slavery. Mahatma Phule, in a certain way, used the Enlightenment kind of trajectory to understand the issue of caste in India. You might be knowing that in Europe there was a certain kind of intellectual process, which is understood as enlightenment. Enlightenment has identified the human being and freedom and unfreedom as the dichotomy to understand human being. The Enlightenment has argued that the human beings are free and unfreedom is not human. So this is a certain kind of dichotomy which is structured by Enlightenment. That is, what is human is freedom. Having freedom is human, and denying freedom is inhuman. So these kinds of, we can say, ideas in certain way influenced in all parts of the world. Similarly, it came to India, and when Mahatma Phule was writing Slavery, he has dedicated that book to those people who were fighting against slavery in America. Certainly, you know that this whole kind of idea of slavery it was taken up by Mahatma Phule to specifically understand the very kind of existence of Shudra Deshudra. Mahatma Phule has written an interesting kind of drama, which is known as Tritiya Ratna. And in this Tritiya Ratna, third eye, Tritiya Ratna, it is, you know that the Tritiya Ratna is this eye which is Mahatma Phule is interpreting not as the eye of Shiva, but he is interpreting Tritiya Ratna as the kind of eye as the knowledge Vidya. So interestingly, Mahatma Phule was taking up very interesting issues of slavery through the ideas of the ignorance and knowledge. It is interesting to understand that Mahatma Phule deployed the very term which is there in the Indian philosophy as avidya. Avidya is seen in the Hindu philosophy, in Advaita philosophy. There is certain kind of usage of the term called avidya in Indian philosophy, particularly in Hinduism, particularly in the Vedanta philosophy. And there is in Buddhist philosophy, there is a certain kind of, you can say, use of the term called avidya. Interesting kind of nuances you will find in Phule's understanding. One very clear kind of ways that avidya is seen as the hurdle between knowing the truth, that is the Atman is Brahman, and the avidya is the hurdle, is the kind of, you can say, barricade which doesn't allow to understand that the Atman is Brahman. And the avidya is understood in Advaita philosophy in these terms. However, in Buddhist philosophy, avidya is understood as the cause of pain. It's the first cause of pain. The avidya is understood as the first cause of pain. So this is a certain kind of understanding. And there is another kind of understanding which is there in Buddhist philosophy, is this, that avidya is a certain kind of misconception. So these are two understandings of Buddhist philosophy. Interestingly, Mahatma Phule understand the avidya in various terms. For example, he understands, he can say, makes out the meaning of avidya as illiteracy, and he takes down what are the impact of illiteracy on Shudra Deshudra. Then he takes up the another meanings of it, is that this is nothing but misconception. So according to him, Brahmanism, through its certain kind of trajectory, like myths, like rituals, like outlandish kind of metaphysical ideas, they are conditioning the Shudra mind, or women Shudra mind, And that is exactly what we understand as misconception and avidya. Avidya, he understands as the losing the capability of reasoning. Because avidya, in certain way, can say, impoverishes you from reasoning. So its capability of reasoning is denied to you by avidya. So avidya is understood as the kind of, can say, a capability which in certain way gives you reasonable thinking, can say rational thinking. So rational thinking is it's certain out, stripped off because of this avidya. So these are very complex meanings he attaches to the term called avidya. And you have to understand this whole text which he has written as third eye within these premises of avidya. And what he is talking about is interesting kind of story which he depicts in that drama. And that is one kind of peasant woman is laboring in her field, working in his own kind of house, and his whole kind of, we can say, everyday kind of struggle of livelihood. The Brahmin comes to a house and asks for the alms. He can say ask for dakshina. And the peasant women, as being largely indulged in kind of labor, asked the Brahmins that you look very strong and sturdy. You are a stout man. Why not working rather than asking for dakshina? You should somehow earn your own livelihood. You should not ask for the alms. We ourselves are not enough, you can say, reach that we could somehow give you the alms or dakshinas. So when this episode happens, the Brahman, with very, we can say, shrewd ways, does not show any kind of resentment and goes away and comes back in and talks about the prophecy. That he says that you are supposed to give birth to a child. She supposed to be looking as pregnant. So the Brahmin says that you are pregnant and your child will be detrimental to the existence of your husband. So if your child takes birth, there is possibility that your husband might die. And by listening this, the woman is in certain way get tied, I can say, get groomed by his ideas, or get lured by his ideas, and then she start asking him, what is the way out? If my child, which will be taking birth, would be detrimental to the existence of my husband, then what is the way out? And he'd start, you can say, placing his own kind of, you can say, cunningness and this kind of trickery. He talks about rituals, and in a certain way, she herself is takes this whole kind of slavery in her own ways. She's willingly participates in this whole kind of slavery. It is not he is thirsting the slavery. She herself is willingly participating in this whole unequal relationship slavery. And the whole idea, the world of ideas of, we can say, prophecy, the world of ideas of determining factors of your lives, the whole idea of the Jyotish, the whole idea of the God, the whole idea of systems of, we can say, rituals. The Brahmin start exploiting her, and she herself, you can say, succumbing to these kinds of exploitative relationship. So it is a very complex kind of relationship Mahatma Phule was explaining through this drama called Third Eye. And here you will find that there is two things, very important things, that there is a certain kind of clutch of psychological slavery, which in certain way gives you a docility, it takes the power from you of self kind of determination. It gives you certain kind of dependence. So all such kinds of complex relationships are configured through a certain kind of system of misconception, that is avidya. And that is exactly what Phule was symbolically talking about. And then this whole missionary comes and he talks about the light. And then she understands that the Shudras were exploited by the Brahmins, and they would be coming out from it basically by learning. And she start going to a night school, and also her husband start going to night school. So if at all you understand this whole kind of trajectory, so one has to understand that another aspect of knowledge which Ambedkar Phule was talking was a kind of avidya. So it is, if at all you start understanding Indian philosophy, Buddhism is Indian philosophy, Hinduism is Indian philosophy, then Mahatma Phule was engaging with the terms called avidya. And his own way he was making out the meanings of avidya and was deploying to the situation within which he was living. So certainly, in certain way, he was using the philosophical kinds of contours to understand his own reality, and certainly was giving certain kind of universals within understanding. So slavery is a kind of term which can be universals. It is there in the all parts of the world as the way of relations. Is a certain kind of relationship where yourself will is denied, your self kind of autonomy is denied to you. So all such things which is there as slavery was minutely we can say explained by Mahatma Phule. And here is interesting kind of thing which Phule talks about, and he in certain way explains you that the caste relationship, and it's very important kind of contribution of Mahatma Phule to the world of philosophy, is this, that he was talking that the relationship between two castes are structured through this kind of misconception of the relationship, that I am a Brahmin, you are the Shudra, so you have to salute me and you have to obey my orders. You have to worship me. You have to take my orders, and all such kind of thing. These ideas that somebody is superior, somebody is inferior. This is the world of ideas within which the structure of exploitation operates. So Phule's kind of complex kind of argument one has to understand is this, that he explains that the Brahmin, this Brahminism, as a system of relationship gives a certain kind of sense of identity, and within this sense of identity, surplus appropriation takes place. When surplus is appropriated through the social relationship of caste, and this social relationship of caste is structured by a certain frame of ideas, and therefore you will find that in particular kind of condition of peasantry and Brahmin, peasantry and moneylender, will find this kinds of, you can say, inequality, or kind of dichotomy. You will find that Brahmin is, if you tell you start taking out a certain kind of meanings of Brahmin. Brahmin is Guru. If you are living in a certain kind of villages, you will find always there is a epithet given to Brahmin as Guruji. And you have to understand, then when he becomes Guru, then Shudra peasant becomes a disciple. The relationship is very much there. This who will command, will order, who will take commands, and who will take orders. This is very certain. Then you will find that Brahmin is also one another it is Bhudev, you are the God. And there is a relationship between God and Bhakti. So you have to understand the Bhudev term of Brahmin. You have to understand the Brahmins are called a Swami. So these kinds of ways you will find a certain kind of subjugating psyche. It's structured within Shudra, the Shudra masses and women. Women, Shudras, the Shudra masses, they are structured within these kinds of ideas. And when you are taking up the idea of being a Shudra peasant, you are, your body language, your positions, your thinking will be certainly of a subjugated man or subjugated women. And if you are a Brahmin, your own kind of body language, your own kind of, can say, identity, your own kind of agency would be of master. So this master-slave or a master-servant relationship is structured through castes. So you'll find a Brahmin has a certain kind of advantage as a master caste, and Baniya moneylender has a certain kind of advantage. He knows the skill of writing. He knows the skill of cunningness. You will find that what Phule was giving us small anthropological details are very important. Phule was saying that the peasant are addressing the saukars and moneylenders as my bab. You are my palak. You are my patron. You are my patriarch. So this patriarchal relationship within the child is subordinated to the power of parent. So these relationships are there. There is unequal kinds of relationship. He knows the art of writing. He doesn't know the art of writing. He has the money. He is dependent. So this whole structure of dependence to which slavery is structured is explained by Mahatma. And therefore, you have to understand that Mahatma Phule's writing is giving you immense kinds of details of anthropology. And here you will find that, yes, Mahatma Phule was talking about a relationship between two castes, where surplus is appropriated through a relationship between these two castes. This relationship is not merely as a way Marxism understands the relationship as class relationship. In class relationship, you know that means of productions are owned by one class and the others don't have the means of production. So there is haves and have-nots. So if at all you understand means of production as the key to understand classes, it won't work in the caste systems. The peasant caste is having ownership over land. As you know that in particularly medieval times and even in modern times, the peasant caste are having the ownership of land. Yes, in British period, there was some kind of, can say, process of zamindari and other things that we will talk. But however, the working classes or working castes, the toiling caste, have their own means of production in their own hands. For example, if he's a barber is having all kinds of implements and all kinds of skill with him, and he will be serving to other people and getting remuneration from it. There would be a certain kind of technology and means of productions of blacksmith, which will be owned by himself, and he would be somehow producing implements. So there is a certain kind of, you can say, these structures which are there. However, the caste exploitation takes place through the unequal exchange. This is very important. This is not mode of production. Mode of exchange is very important. Caste is mode of production. I argue that caste was mode of production. It's not now, but caste used to be mode of production. One. Secondly, caste was a mode of exchange, and this is unequal mode of exchange. One has to understand the nuances of unequal mode of exchange. For example, if Dalits are giving the services to the Yajmans or the villagers, then
their remuneration is given as the alms or the Dalits has to take the remuneration, boluto, in terms of the imposition of yachaka, imposition of a demand, a position as servility. So this servile position is structured, and the exchange is therefore dependent and therefore unequal. So this inequality is structured through certain kind of caste kinds of mechanism. For example, in British time as well as in present time, the peasantry is always very dependent. The peasantry could be exploited by making them dependent. Caste is a certain kind of system which makes the low caste dependent. All toiling castes are made dependent on the high caste, on the Savarna caste, or on the ruling caste. For example, you will find that even today, the peasantry is walked down by the credit. They are in search of the capital, and in search of capital, they are somehow comes under the structure of money lending. So they goes to banks, they take loans, and they are under indebtedness. This indebtedness in certain way makes you dependent. This is a certain kind of indebtedness very strongly there in times of Phule or in medieval period, in 19th century, and in today's 21st century. That makes the peasantry dependent. And similarly, we will find that Dalit is dependent on peasantry. So there is a kind of hierarchy within which surplus is appropriated. So you have to understand that this whole system doesn't give the toiling caste the position or the capacity to consume. So you'll find that from peasantry to Dalits, there would be least consumption capacities. Means Dalit were disallowed to wear good clothes. Dalits were disallowed to raise up good houses. They were denied to take good food. They were only given the dead animals to eat. So you'll find every kinds of possible way that how caste system has own kind of mechanism of exploitation. Phule was the great kind of thinker who was identifying the structures of exploitation. Therefore, he was talking about the structures of slavery as a kind of rope through which the toiling castes are exploited, particularly Shudra, Atishudra are exploited. So in this sense, you will understand that what exactly the way Phule was talking about slavery, caste slavery, and he has used a kind of symbiotic term as it is the kind of, you can say, embrace of snake. When snake embraces you, when snake in certain way traps you, you are immobile. So it makes you immobile. You can't move. You can't fight against your own kind of predicament. You are in certain way made immobile. Phule in certain way was talking about the caste slavery, which makes you immobile. It makes you without agency. It makes you fatalistic kind. It inflicts fatalistic kind of conditions. So in certain way, Phule was explaining a kind of caste slavery and structure of caste slavery. Here one has to understand what is knowledge. This term, what is knowledge, in certain way was engaged, but what is the way out there? And so therefore, Phule talks about the knowledge and the criteria of knowledge. Phule has argued that there are three kinds of logics, and a very interesting kind of depiction you will find in Phule's writing. He talks about logics, structure of logics, and structure of logic which fetches you knowledge, which derives knowledge, which asserts knowledge. For example, he talks about the first kind of logic where the actor and his act or her act is linked. For example, the cobweb has created a net. Cobweb has created a net, or a man has used a knife. So, what man has created a knife or a tool. Cobweb has created a net. So this relationship is between actor and his act or its act. This is a certain kind of relations. He says that this is a relationship which you can look at, you can observe, you can falsify, and this is as protection, which you can observe by your own senses. So these are the kind of linkages between two objects or two kinds of things where the act and actors can be linked, cause and they can be causal kind of relationship. So this causal relationship, which can be observed, concretely can be observed with pratyaksha, is seen him as one kind of logic. The other kind of logic which he talks about is the logic which we understand as inference. As you know that this inference is, he has given certain kind of inference, let's say examples like a wind round the ship. So nobody could see wind, but you know that the kind of wind and the kind of impact of wind, and yes, that can drown the ship. So certainly this is a logic of inference, and he gives a certain kind of acceptance. He accepts the first and second logic as a criteria to derive knowledge. And then he talks about the third logic. And this third logic was the logic of, he says, unrestrained imagination. In Marathi, it's quite more picturesque than my translation of his kind of ideas. He said this unrestrained kind of imagination. Unrestrained imagination, the example is mythology. In all kinds of mythology, there can be unrestrained kind of imagination. For example, there was Hiranyakashipu, who was there in a pillar, and he breaks the pillar and comes out from the pillar, and then he takes out the Hiranyakashipu on its and kills him by the nails. So these kinds of ideas which are having unrestrained imaginations, there is no certain kind of validity to it. These imaginations are doesn't have any in certain way. So it is unrestrained imagination. So he gives example of this unrestrained kind of logic, unrestrained kind of logic is mythology, and similarly he talks about metaphysics. He says he has, can say, talked on the Jnaneshwari. You might not be knowing about Jnaneshwari. Jnaneshwari is the commentary on Gita. 12th century, there was a Saint Jnaneshwar who has commented on Gita, and it is a kind of work which is celebrated in India as the great work of commentary on Gita. He takes out the 12th kind of chapter of Jnaneshwari and start, you can say, falsifying the kind of sentences as unrestrained imagination. For example, he talks about the Atma and Brahman, Atma and Sharir. Atma, soul, and there is a conception. What is soul? Soul is eternal. Soul is indestructible. This whole kind of verses in Gita where it is argued that it neither be demolished by the wind, neither by the fire not, it will perish anyway, it will be indestructible. All such kinds of things are there in Gita. So this is a kind of a conception of Atma. This is a conception of soul. And there is a conception of body, which is transient, which is perishing. Body has a certain kind of temporary time, and it perishes. So this is a certain kind of ideas which are linked. And then it is said that the eternal kind of Atman takes the form of a body, and there is Punarjanma, there is rebirth, and there is certain kind of acts, and because of certain acts, there are rebirths, and goes and goes and goes. So Phule argues, interesting kind of argument. He argues that.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, but you have 10 more minutes. If you can conclude in the next 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
So this is unrestrained kind of idea. So he says that the Atman is the kind of example of unrestrained kind of logic. It is unrestrained imagination. And therefore he says there is no validity that without body there is Atman. Whenever there is a body, there is Atman. So Atman, the idea of Atman cannot be established by unrestrained imagination. So his ideas is demolishing the whole kind of Brahmanical corpus of knowledge. Lastly, I will pick up his last kind of point about the way he has picked up experience as the grounding of knowledge. It's an interesting kind of argument which he offers in his tract called Ishara. You might be knowing that Randade, M.G. Randade was a great kind of reformer in Maharashtra, was called for a speech in Pune, and he spoke in that particular kind of gathering, and he made 3 sentences. One sentence was that within these 30 years, the condition of peasantry is improved. Second argument or second sentence which he offered was that if castes are helpful to progress, then castes are good. And the third kind of statement was that the Brahmin Kulkarnis, the caste, which is, that the kind of office, that Kulkarni is the village accountant, and they are helping the peasant. So on this statement, Phule put a rejoinder by publishing a tract called Ishara, where Phule begins by a kind of invocation of Kabira's doha, Jisatana lage wahitana jane, bija kya jane gavara. The body which has taken pain, only that body knows about that pain. Nobody else would know the pain. Similarly, you have to understand there was a certain kind of book written by a great kind of thinker of Maharashtra, Tarabhai Shinde, on Stree Purush, men-women comparison. And the people from Phule's kind of movement, Satyashodak movement, a kind of patriarchal kind of colleagues of Mahatma Phule, attacked on Tarabhai Shinde. Phule took side of Tarabhai Shinde, and while taking the side of Tarabhai Shinde, Phule argues, Jisatana lage vahitana jane, bija kya janega. The body which knows the pain, others can't know the pain. So in interesting ways, Phule claims that the subaltern experiences are not the part of the understanding of those who doesn't have that experience of caste subaltern. So caste subalterns or gender subalterns themselves can contribute to the knowledge of themselves. So it is a certain kind of self-representations of Dalits and women's are argued by Mahatma Phule. And interestingly, Mahatma Phule was influenced by empiricism. I could have told you about the way he was influenced by Locke and Vico. Largely, he was influenced by Vico. He was influenced by Locke. Locke's way of understanding the experience. He also has a certain kind of grounding about the way experience can be turned into knowledge. You might be knowing about this that Gopal Guru has written an interesting book called Cracked Mirror, and it talks about experience, particularly both Sarukai and Gopal Guru who are arguing over the experience and the grounding of experience into knowledge. So how experience can be turned into knowledge is the issue which Phule tackled in his own writing. Interesting kind of ways. Phule takes particularity and universality in certain ways. For example, there is an interesting kind of piece of letter which Phule has written to Ranade. Ranade was a man who built institutions in Maharashtra. And you might be knowing, some of you might be knowing Marathi Sahitya Sammelan, the literary conferences of Maharashtra, were started by Ranade. And it was second kind of literary conference where Ranade has invited Mahatma Phule to be part of that literary conference. But Mahatma Phule rejected that invitations and returned back to Ranade, where in certain way he was making the argument that in your kind of manch, your stage, the pains of Shudra Atishudra could not be discussed. Therefore, I'm not coming to your stage. However, it is interesting that you can understand. Means if at all a Brahmin cannot understand the pain of the Dalit, if at all men cannot understand the pain of women, then knowledge cannot be grounded. Knowledge is universal. Guru makes a certain kind of differentiation between the experience and knowledge. Experience is personal. Experience is, in certain way, it's subjective. Experience is, in certain way, individual. But the knowledge is external. Knowledge is objective. Knowledge is universal. If my particular experience, if at all it cannot be known to others, then it can't be a knowledge. So this predicament, which is there in his own kind of you can say position, he resolves in this particular kind of letter. He says, when you will be in position to accept the human rights, and you will have the wings of humanism, then and then you will understand my pains, or then you will understand the pains of Shudra Shudras. Means he makes a certain kind of leverage that Brahmins or men can understand the specificity of experiences of the women and downtrodden caste through humanism. So humanism is a certain kind of strategy through which you can turn the experiences into knowledge. The humanism as the whole kind of ways we can articulating is universal, and that's how the universal can be linked to is certain way tried by Mahatma Phule to deploying of humanism. So you will find a certain kind of strategies which he was talking about when he was talking about the labor of women. He was talking about these kinds of labor which the Shudra women is doing. No European woman would come and do such kind of labor. She will run away. He has made a certain kind of comparison between a Brahmin woman and a peasant Shudra woman. And it's an interesting kind of comparison he offers. And there you will find that this is a kind of humanistic dialogue which you can turn experiences into universal kinds of knowledge. So this is a certain kind of negotiation of subjectivities
and through certain kind of subjective kind of confrontation and negotiation, the process through humanistic grounds, we will somehow certainly come to terms with these universes. Secondly, we'll find that there is a certain kind of tradition of using the conceptual world of social sciences. Mahatma Phule was interestingly taking out anthropology and certain kind of terms of social sciences which are there around him, and was deploying to understand the specificity of issues of caste and specificity of issue of gender exploitation. However, these terms have in certain way has carried out this whole kind of experiences into the knowledges, universal knowledges. Certainly, you will find his process of negotiation, interrogation, was a very fabulous process of interrogation. For example, there are two kinds of, we can say, dialogues which are there part of his book called Code of Armors and Armors of Car, where there is one kind of dialogue. This is dialogue with Khasa Maratha. The man claimed himself to be pure Maratha or the chaste Maratha. So this is a dialogue where a man comes to him and he doesn't have a kind of caste identity to show as groups. However, he starts telling him as Marathas. He asks, who are Marathas? Who are exactly you? And he says, Marathas are all those who come from Mahrashtra. So who are you? Then he talks, telling him, I'm Kumari, I'm a peasant. And then the whole kind of argument and interrogations about the experiences of peasantry. And these experiences of peasantries are in certain way, you can say, turn into principles, turn into certain kind of universals. And the way he started deriving certain kind of universal ideas, in which he can sort of his own problem. Similarly, there was another kind of dialogue where the man who used to be the follower of Kabira and was angered by Phule's criticism of Vedas, and he wanted to fight with Mahatma Phule that why you're criticizing Vedas. Then Phule, you can say, start talking to him, and while talking to him, he asked questions that have you seen Vedas? He said, no, I have not seen Vedas. Where you have seen Vedas? He said, I have seen the Vedas in the house of Brahmin. Have you seen them? Have you read them? He said, no, I have not read them. So what Vedas are talking? He said, these are the gossip which are told by the Brahmins to us that what is in Vedas. We really don't know. We have not read that. Then he says, if at all this is the divine kind of Apaurusheya, then this, in which language it is? He said, in Sanskrit. How many people know Sanskrit? If this gospel is for all mankind, then majority of people are not capable of understanding Sanskrit. So all such questions are posed, and through these questions, experiences are in certain way examined. And through this process of examination, there is a certain kind of process of building knowledge. You will find certain kind of modality of walk where a certain kind of observation, then reflection, and then knowledge is in certain way articulated in the scheme of Mahatma Phule. There is urgency that you are talking me that I should finish my lectures. Lastly, I will take two kinds of ideas and stop. One important thing which Phule has given to us is the way one should look at our own selves, our own kind of identities. And therefore, Phule has given us a certain kind of modality of history or philosophy of history. He largely has, in certain way, made innovations in historical methods, particularly the Golden mode, and he started using alternative sources like myths. He started using anthropology, he started using etymology. He, in certain way, has understood history as the struggle between castes, as when there was a fall of Wali. There is important principle which he articulates is the history of India, history of caste struggle. And then he can say, way he takes out the ideas of violence, that takes the ideas as the forces of history. He talks about power and history. So various ways he is somehow giving us the philosophy of history. And in certain way,
is a philosopher, although he was not a kind of thinker who was using the ideas in terms of the philosophical lexicon. Either he was using any kind of, we can say, the language of philosophy. However, there was a certain kind of engagement with philosophy, and therefore my argument is that he was a philosopher, and his philosophies have a kind of implications to a kind of revolutionary implications, that he was a revolutionary philosopher and was sorting out the predicament of caste slavery and was talking about the gender slavery, and his path was to emancipate from the structures of caste slavery and the structures of gender slavery. I thank you and your organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Professor Bagade. It was a very insightful talk and very detailed talk as well. A very new way of putting Mahatma Phule's work in a philosophical perspective. One thing I sort of found interesting was the mention of how discourse and power is related. And this may be a very basic observation, but I was reminded of the Foucaultian idea of discourse and power itself. So the reflections of something similar can also be seen in Mahatma Phule's work as well. So thank you once again for your wonderful talk. We have a question in the comment in the chat box. I will read it out. It's by Veer Pratap Singh Gautam. Very comprehensive presentation, sir. What was the mode through which Mahatma Phule wanted to bring Shudra Adishudra against the, sorry, I need to scroll down a little bit. What was the mode through which Mahatma Phule wanted to bring Shudra Adishudra together against the oppression? In what manner can we use his ideas of Shudra Adishudra unity to alter the power structure in the present times?
A good question. Obviously, Phule in his own way was put the antagonism as a Brahmin and Shudra as the antagonism. As we presently could understand this in the light of Ambedkar. Ambedkar in certain way took departure from Mahatma Phule as far as this antagonism is concerned. And he emphasized this kind of caste antagonism in several ways. For example, he has classified as caste-class consciousness. For example, Savarna-Avarna consciousness, which is operated in caste systems. So not necessarily that Shudra, the Shudra are one and can say seen together. But there are other kinds of caste dichotomies or caste kind of consciousness which operate in caste society. One such kind of consciousness and such kind of dichotomy, kind of contradiction is Savarna-Avarna contradiction. There is obviously this Phule was placing it as Brahmin, non-Brahmin. So Phulean kind of structure was this, that Brahmin, Shudra, Ati Shudra as one. So it is a certain kind of trajectory where the Dvija Advij trajectory is surpassed, and you will find that those who are seen as Shudras and Ati Shudras are seen in one. And this also a certain kind of consciousness which operate, particularly in Maharashtra, will find in certain times consciousness was built around Shudra Shudra unity. However, Shudra Shudra unity is illusionary basically because there is a caste kind of exploitation and caste structures of domination which create a certain kind of contradictions within these castes. These kinds of contradictions can be seen as contradictions which are inimical, but not sincerely inimical in certain way. For example, in untouchable caste, particularly the Dalit caste, you will find there are Mahar, Mang, Sapar in Maharashtra, and there is a certain kind of caste rivalry operating. Ambedkar has identified this caste rivalry. I mean, he says that when one caste comes to relationship with other caste, there is a caste consciousness which operates. So the kind of rivalries which we see in untouchable caste, there is no relationship of exploitation and domination. But vice versa, there is a relationship of domination and exploitation in structure of villages. The dominant peasant caste are exploiters. Dominant peasant caste are having a certain kind of position of dominance in villages, and the elites are the subordinated in certain ways. So one has to understand that this Shudra Atishudra unity as a political stand was taken out by non-Brahmins, and later on it was taken by BST. However, Ambedkar is very right and very accurate to understand this whole kind of nuance contradictions of caste. So in present day, if at all you have to engage with this issue, it should not be with Plebian kind of ideas, but Ambedkarian kind of ways. You can rather can take it very kind of sincerely and put out, somehow take out to a certain kind of stage of resolving it. But one has to understand that the caste contradiction prevails as Ambedkar has a.
Thank you, sir. Others, if you have questions, you can unmute yourselves and ask.
So can I continue with the question which I asked?
Yes, yes, do.
Sir, I specifically talked about Mahatma Phule because since the presentation was about it, and Dr. Ambedkar, he explicitly did not state about the unity of Shudra and the Ati Shudra, and majorly his movement is said to be concentrated to the Dalits only. But then in the contemporary Ambedkarite movement, a fraction or a considerable part of movement, people are talking about the Dalit Bahujan unity or the idea of Bahujan. So in that light, I'm asking this question because
absolutely, this is a certain kind of predicament which I would definitely see with very kind of, can say, open ways. And I would take out you to a certain kind of effort made by Ambedkar, and Ambedkar, particularly in 1930s and 1940s, have organized a struggle against Khuti system in Konkan, and where he certainly took up this struggle of peasantry against the exploiting kind of codes. And mostly the codes were Brahmins, some were Marathas, some were Muslims, and others were from can say Marwadi, Baniya, or Parshis, who were the codes. And the larger kinds of structure of the peasantry was organized. This peasantry was Bhandari peasantry, it was Kundi peasantry, it was Agri peasantry, it was Mahar peasantry. And they are having kind of certified as the particularly Dalits used to be in the Vetis, forced labor. They were largely in kind of, we can say, structures of forced labor. So Ambedkar, in certain way, placed this whole kind of issue of peasantry and fought against the kind of zamindari or the codes. So one can learn from this. What is this kind of structures? Here is very clear that this is a certain kind of social and material kind of contradiction which Ambedkar is very strongly identified. You will find that Ambedkar was very successful. You won't find these kinds of experiments elsewhere in Marxist kinds of struggles. It was in Ambedkar's struggle, you will find that the Kumbis, the Mahars, tenants, were with each other. They are one and the same. However, when the struggle in certain way was evaporated, the caste crept in, and caste in certain way has somehow demolished the kind of the strength which Ambedkar generated in this field Konkan. You might be knowing that in the time of Independent Labour Party, Ambedkar got 11 seats from Konkan. And later on in 1946, Ambedkar got none from it. So one has to understand this whole kind of caste, the way it operates and the way contradictions comes into the whole kind of thing.
So as a certain kind of very strong experiment, I definitely like to highlight the first phase. But as a historian, I would definitely say that the second phase, that this is where disillusionment took place. The caste crept in. There was caste kind of rivalries started emerging, and even Dalits were beaten up in later part of that moment. And those who has earlier accepted the vanguardship of Mahar peasantry, later on started beating Mahar peasantry. So one has to understand these kinds of antagonism which is operating through caste. So what exactly Ambedkar was talking, and that one has to understand, until we are not fighting this mental makeup. What Ambedkar once told is that caste is a notion. As I understand as a historian, as activist, caste is materiality. And Ambedkar also talk about materiality. Caste materiality as caste as conscious. The caste materiality and caste consciousness has to be fought with a certain kind of rigor. Until you are not fighting caste, there won't be a certain kind of unity. Therefore, Phule was giving us Sarvajnik Satyadharma, and Babasaheb was giving us the Bauddha Dharma, where you will come together. For example, in Unleash of the Caste, Babasaheb made a certain kind of point vis-a-vis Karl Marx. Karl Marx has said that workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains. Ambedkar says the proletariat of India, caste proletariat of India would not unite because they are somehow entangled with their own castes. They cannot give up. They have chains, so they will give up the chains. But in our kind of reality of caste society, the proletariats with their caste identities, and they won't give the caste identities. So what is the way out? So this is a certain kind of exercise of a moral frame within which the individual has to be reconstituted, and therefore there is a certain kind of paradigm of cultural struggle which is imperative. This is much very, you can say, is essential to all kinds of these conception of Dalit Bhujan unity. Dalit Bhujan unity only can operate with a certain kind of strong cultural fight against Brahmins. That is what exactly one has to understand. Without it, without a struggle against caste, these kinds of conception does not get real kinds of grounding. That one has to understand.
And sir, can we say that cultural fight which you are talking of, Babasaheb gave in form of Buddhism?
And Phule also has given the alternative to Satyashodhak Samaj and Sarvajnik Satyadharma. It's very, they both are visionary. Therefore, Ambedkar in 1954 said that you non-Brahmins have given up Phule, but I won't give up Mahatma Phule's path. We would be the followers of Mahatma Phule, in the sense that you have to come out of this whole kind of cultural milieu called Brahminism. You have to reconstitute your lives out of the structure of Brahminism. Because within Brahminism, there is a certain kind of rivalries within which the caste identities are structured through images of others. If at all I am having certain kind of caste identity, my caste identity will be linked to other caste identities. It's a certain kind of mirroring kind of images through which we will be linked to each other. And therefore, this whole kind of, you can say, complex structures of inhumanity get entrenched into these kinds of relationships. And therefore, one has to understand that these cultural kind of struggles and large alternatives has to be built in. And if at all you are not building the alternatives, then your own kind of alternatives are appropriated by the Brahminical capitalist forces. That is the condition. So one has to understand these nuances, and one should not see in a Marxist term that what is real is economic and what is unreal is cultural. In particular kind of caste society, you have to see, for example, if take this whole kind of Marxian model, and Althusser has talked about it as what is production is the base and what is reproduction is superstructure. If reproduction is superstructure, the caste is the structure of reproduction. The caste patriarchy is the structure of reproduction, but it is grounds in the economy. So one has to understand that this whole kind of superstructure is grounded as economy. So this complexity as this structure, superstructure, has to be given up. If you are talking in these terms, you won't understand the whole kind of nuances of caste. Therefore, one has to understand that the cultural and material battles against caste exploitation only could lead us to a certain kind of a way ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the answer. Dr. Nishant has a question. I'll read it out. Thank you, sir, for the nice lecture. Kosambi said there were two types of subjugation in ancient Greece: slavery, that is ownership of an individual body or some degree of mobility, and helotism, humiliation of a population or some degree of autonomy. He said the caste system as developed in ancient India was more like the latter. Would Phule agree with such a distinction? What are the similarities and differences of caste slavery with other conceptions of slavery in the ancient and modern world?
Fine. But you are arguing with Kosambi, fine. But this is what exactly the argument of Kosambi. And in Phulean terms and in Ambedkar's terms, the term slavery is used in a certain kind of metaphoric way. And that metaphor has helped us to understand nuances of caste. So if at all you take out the Greek kind of differentiation between helotism and slavery, as to understand the situation of caste, I think it's unwarranted in certain ways. It is interesting if you want to read Babasaheb Ambedkar, who has made certain kind of analogy between Greek slavery, Roman slavery, and caste slavery. He was talking about the slavery in America and Indian slavery. He was talking about relationship between Protestants and Catholics in England. He was talking about Jews and the others relationship and certain kind of modalities, domination, subordination. So what exactly one has to understand that the unique kind of nature of caste, where there are certain kind of processes which are very unique. So helotism, I won't can say take out the helotism as the way one can understand caste. Caste should be understood in nuanced ways, and these nuanced ways are given by Phule and Ambedkar. For example, this whole kind of ideology and slavery, whether Kosambi has any way deployed these kinds of stuff to understand the earlier kind of ancient slavery. What was the process of this? Phule definitely would. Phule, in certain way, if at all is talking about ancient Indian past, he has used mythology as a flat way of understanding ancient India. Is erroneous. I won't accept that. However, one has to understand that he talks about the subjugation and talks about the subjugation in terms of a relationship symbols. And for example, the Brahmins are having superiority through Upanenas, and Dalits are having the inferiority through the black thread. Do you know that Mahars are forced to wear the black thread as the identification of their own low caste self? So one has to understand that these nuances of because caste is not as could be seen as a race kind of society. Caste doesn't have that kind of physical features. So how could you differentiate? So you'll find these kinds of things through which this wearing the black thread is a certain kind of symbol of slavishness, symbol of impurity. The impurity is associated, dirt is associated, the slavery is associated, the humiliation is associated. And so all the schemes of master-slave relationship is symbiotically there in caste relationship. It is not exactly per se what exactly the slavery operates in Greece or slavery operates in America. Not exactly in the same way. For example, in slavery, there is a direct possession of your body and your will. For example, master is master and is owner of the body and will of that slave. Particularly in India, the caste slavery is that you yourselves are, being the low caste, are taking out the agencies which are given by castes. So this is a different kind of quality of exploitation. And this is a certain kind of ways the agencies of low caste were structured through which the surplus was appropriated. So if you take certain kind of scholarship of Kosambi, I admire Kosambi's scholarship a lot. But however, Kosambi has its own kind of scheme of class. He understood caste as class. And the grounding kind of economic structure was class, and caste was as if it is superstructure. So this is a certain kind of, you can say, a fictitious understanding of caste. It is, as Comrade Sharath Patil used to blame them as Vedanti communism or Vedanti Marxism. I do not in such a way accept these kinds of ideas of Kosambi.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or post the question in the chat box. All right. If there are no more questions, we've also reached 6:30, which is the scheduled time for the talk. Is someone asking a question? Or okay, that was an unmute. Sorry. So in any case, once again, thank you, Professor Umesh Bagade, for this wonderful talk. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Khushboo, for moderating the talk. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.